Welcome to Business Mastery with Don Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery podcast. Again, we're going to be talking about some leadership skills ceilings that people can run up against as their companies grow or if they've been in business for a longer time. And we're going to talk specifically about operations and when you should consider hiring that COO, even fractionally. So I have Ashish here to talk to us more about it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Don. Really happy to be here.
Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
Yeah, sure. Maybe if it helps to just give a little background myself. I've been in tech most of my career. I was previously the co-founder of a wireless company. It was one of those like starting in a garage type stories. And eventually that company built up. It was acquired by a Fortune 500, Qualcomm. And after that, I was in Apple in management, managed a pretty sizable operations and manufacturing team, and spent about 5 years in Apple. Learned a lot about how to build amazing teams and an amazing culture. And eventually had the entrepreneurial bug again. I quit Apple. I acquired a distressed e-commerce business and spent 4 or 5 years, quite painful years, in turning everything around in that business, from the team culture, operations, supply chain, the B2B, B2C channels. Eventually, it did turn around in April of 2023. It was acquired by a larger competitor of ours. After that, I had the chance to help a couple of small, medium-sized businesses where the founders had hit a skill set ceiling. They were burnt out. The revenues had plateaued, and retooled those businesses within 3, 4 months. Their revenues grew 30, 40%. And because of that, I ended up having more engagements than I could handle myself.
Yeah.
And that's when I started ScaleUpExec, which is a fractional COO firm. And we're focused on helping small, medium-sized businesses achieve potentials that they didn't think were possible.
I love that. So before we dive a whole lot, because I am going to ask you about the revenue plateaus and things as sort of those red flags or those mile markers to consider. Let's talk first about what the role typically is in a company as a COO, what that covers, and then who normally does that when a business first starts? It's the founder, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Usually, a founder, or when a business is early on, that founder or entrepreneur will be doing everything, even beyond operations. They might even be doing the books. They might be doing whatever is needed in whatever funding can allow. What I've found is, after having worked with so many businesses, that there's really, and I think even you alluded to this earlier before we started, is that there's people who are really good at envisioning what the future could look like and strategizing about what the future could look like. And there are people who are really good at taking that vision and executing on it. And from what I've seen, about 90% of people are only one or the other. It's very rare to have somebody who's really good at both. And
Right.
that's okay. So I think it's actually first important for every entrepreneur to understand which of these two are they, and what gives them energy versus what sucks away their energy. Is it envisioning, thinking of the future, seeing where we want to get to, or is it now taking those future plans and boiling it down and executing? And that's kind of where the COO typically plays, is this seeing what, let's say, what a visionary or strategist type CEO, what they envision for the future, and seeing, is that practical? Is it possible, given the funding that we have, given the type of team and the skill set that we have, and given what the market dynamics are like? Is that possible? And if yes, now let's break that down into real concrete, actionable things and make it happen. Put together plans, put together accountability mechanisms, even create the right culture within a team to enable and support the achieving of those goals. So that's kind of what a CEO does.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, as the founder, especially in the early years, and you're kind of doing it all, and you've set up what you think are going to be efficient operations based on what you envision. But at some point, you grow past your ability, likely to consider things like efficiencies, capacities, like we were talking about. Where do you typically see that? What, 3 years, 5 years, faster, slower? Or what are the red flags that maybe even before we get to the revenue being the red flag, where do you see that even early on, maybe with capacity or efficiency.
Yeah, I think it varies for every business, but there's a few things that can give indicators that it's time to get some help or that there might be a plateau upcoming. One is, actually, many of these things are around the founder themselves. So, especially in this day and age, and I find this to be especially with CEOs who are less than 45 years old, so like younger folks, is
Younger
that
folks are right, we're gonna call them babies, I guess, if they're under 45 here. Is that what we're doing? We're just gonna call them. I usually call people under 35 babies. We can go with 25, that's fine too.
yeah, sure. So it's boredom. Many folks under 45, after some period, will start getting bored of either the specific set of things that they're doing, or maybe even as big as the whole business itself. And when boredom sets in, and maybe boredom might be just one wording for it, but or it could be just where their enthusiasm or motivation levels start to decline. Now, if the founder or the CEO or the leader in an organization has lower motivational energies, then that's eventually going to filter down into the rest of the company. It's going to filter into everybody else's motivation level. It's rare to find a company where the leader is less motivated, but everybody else is hyper motivated. It's very unusual. So, if you start noticing, especially if you're a leader, and you start noticing your own energy levels starting to decline or plateau, then that's a good flag for yourself to say, okay, I need to do something about this. Either I need to change my role, or I need to get somebody else to come in and help offset my energy levels, or help me reshift things so that I can bring that energy back again into the business and into my role. Another aspect can be life situations, and especially of the founder. So let's say you've just had your first kid, or you've just something else has happened in your life situation. That's totally amazing if that happens. But now you should try and understand what are the consequences of how your personal life should fit into your business life, and maybe some changes are needed there to help support and make sure that things don't fall off the track. So these are a couple of examples of where you should actually have a flag going off for yourself that, okay, now it's time for me to start proactively doing something about this.
And I wanna kind of specifically talk about, because we see this on social media, this idea of shiny object syndrome. That could actually be maybe an outgrowth of that boredom, right? So we need the new thing or we need to do this, whether or not it fits in our business model or whether or not or we're watching someone else do it and we're trying to chase that shiny thing. Do you see that also as boredom kind of creeps in?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually one of the characteristics of somebody who's a visionary strategist is that they're actually always looking at what next, what else. And sometimes you actually might already have in your hand something that's reasonable. And now, if you really tweak it, tune it, refine it, it could become good enough to achieve your goals. It may not even be necessary to think of what's next. So it does require balance and trying to understand what is relevant to achieve your goals.
I love that. All right. So now let's get into some of the other things you were talking about that if you are sitting here and you had mentioned your revenue has plateaued or you are bored, are there other things that we should be able to examine and look at objectively that says, I need to bring someone else in here?
Yeah. So there are in any business natural plateauing is a part of every business's growth. And so firstly, you don't have to get scared. Oh my God, my things are plateauing, and what do I do now? It's for most businesses that is a natural, and it'll happen multiple times over the life cycle of a business. Where let's say you've had a service or product, and you've taken it to an interesting spot where you've captured a certain amount of the market, or you've kind of satisfied the needs of many people out there, and then now you might start getting into a plateau, and now in order for you to get to the next level, you might have to either go back to the innovation table, or you might have to bring in people who can now take that same product and bring it to, like, different audiences, or tweak it so that it might become relevant to other use cases. So it's actually uh, interesting that when you do hit a plateau, for you to take a step back and see, okay, is it my market that is saturated? Is the product itself no longer relevant to go to more people? Or has market dynamics changed? So this could also be, for example, competitive pressure. This is also a natural part of business. Let's say, most people think, okay, I've got an amazing thing right now. Nobody else is doing it. At some point, if it's amazing, then somebody else will start doing something similar or even better than how you're doing it. And so that also might cause a plateau. So it's a relevant time to now start thinking, do I have the skill set to see what to do next? Or are there gaps in my skill set or in my team's skill set that I now need to bring in some outside help that can fill in those gaps and help me go to the next level?
I love that. All right. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of videos on that first mover disadvantage that have been done by some incredible people. Um, so, yeah, that is something that when that plateau happens, it may not be you. It may be all these other things that are going on. So let's switch over to the personality skill set and the COO as contrasted to the visionary who is always looking for the next thing or who may be, you know, I guess more on the innovator side. So let's talk about the COO himself. What is the contrast? Maybe not in personality, but in skill set and in the way they look at the world and how they balance that visionary.
Yeah. I think firstly, there's different levels of COO. And I've met, of course, hundreds of them through the years. And on my team now, I have who I feel are some of the gems that I've come across over the years. And there's a typical skill set of COO that I've seen, and then there's a extraordinary skill set of COOs that I've seen. And there's a few things that I find help define an extraordinary COO. So one of them is a COO is one of those roles that is a bit different than, let's say, a CFO or a CMO. So a chief marketing officer has to be really good in marketing, maybe a little bit good in sales, but they don't have to be an expert in HR or IT or finance or a bunch of other things. And similarly with a CFO, they have to be really skilled in finance and accounting, but they don't have to be really skilled in, again, HR, IT, or these bunch of other things. But a COO is a bit different. They actually have to be really good in all of these things. And especially when a business is earlier on in its life cycle, where you don't have the luxury of having head of every department or a CFO plus a CMO plus a C, whatever else. Then a COO becomes even more valuable because an exceptional COO, in my definition, will have run pretty much most departments of a business through their career. They will have run finance, they will have run marketing, they will have run IT, HR. They will have built up cultures and teams and organizations, so they can come and plug in gaps across a lot of different areas as the need comes up, and that also helps them. Let's say they're making a decision that's around people ops. They'll understand the implications of that decision to tech, to finance, to every other area. So now they're hopefully making much better decisions because of that breadth and depth of experience that they have in so many things. So a CEO really needs to have a lot of experience in just having gone through running a lot of different departments in a business. That's one area. The second is a really skilled, exceptional COO should have uh, been there for both startup type environments as well as large enterprises. So if you've been there in startup type environments, you know how to come up with product market fit, how to pivot when needed, you know how to build up teams and hire best hiring practices. With large enterprises, you know how to navigate building consensus, how to get buy-in from everybody that's there, and how to change cultures that are really stoic, and have been there for a long time. So I find that somebody who's really skilled, a COO, should have had experience in both types of environments, and that will help them now when they get involved in any engagement. They can navigate through the whole life cycle of a business, not just in a very specific, unique time period of a business. So I think these are a couple of things that define a really good COO. And in terms of how that compares with a CEO or that visionary strategist role, uh, they ideally, I found that really good COOs have also at some point played a CEO role, just so they understand what it's like to be in those shoes and the type of pressures or implications that a CEO has to face, which might be different than pretty much everybody else in the team. Like eventually, the CEO is the one who's responsible and has the weight on their shoulders of everything. So if they've at least stepped in that role at some point, that will help them become a better COO. And it's almost like I remember I first observed this when I was at Apple, where I noticed that some of the best managers were the people who were the best followers. So that meant that they understood their own manager, how they would think, how they would process things, how they would like things to be seen in their world around them. And so that when they went to present something to their manager, uh, they've already solved a lot of the questions that the manager may ask them beforehand. And so that way, I think a really great COO will really understand that CEO's role, will understand that CEO's personality, their ambition, their goal, their vision in so much detail that they'll already be able to preemptively think through and solve problems that the CEO might ask them beforehand. So I think that, that proactiveness and that ability to understand and take that into account, what the CEO's mindset is, what their vision is really important. Another aspect of what makes a good COO relative to CEO is that they can they know how to manage teams really well. They are an amazing leader, so that means they understand each of their team members' capabilities and skill sets and their weaknesses. They understand how to build that culture within a whole team or an organization. They know how to motivate people, and they also know how to take that vision or strategy that the CEOs come up with and piecemeal it down into what's relevant based on the skill set and motivational factors of each team member.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the COO definitely, as you're describing, is much more focused on those second and third order effects of the decisions that are being made. And as a COO, have you gone back to a CEO and said, "Hey, let's look at the timing of this," or "Hey, we're going to need to do this first," or the dependencies? I don't know that a lot of COOs spend a lot of time when they're fleshing out their vision on the eaches, and I think that is definitely more of what we would consider a COO skill. Correct me if I'm wrong, but have you had to go back and sorta adjust any variables based on your knowledge as a COO from, being able to implement maybe exactly as the CEO saw it to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think one of the important roles of a COO is that you're the right-hand person of the CEO. So that means you're there through the strategic process. So it's not just that the CEO has to, in a vacuum, come up with the strategies for the business and the eventual vision for the business, but you're there hand in hand with them as you're working through it. And of course, you're there to honor their vision and understand what that CEO's vision is, but you're also there to help clarify that vision and make sure that it makes sense and maybe you adjust it if it needs to be adjusted. So that's a core important part of a COO's role. And that's where, that relationship between the CEO and CEO, it's so important. Um, it's something that requires honoring and understanding that when you have a CEO who's there next to you, you should feel complete trust. And there should be that mutual trust both ways so that because you're going to be working through a lot of difficult things, a lot of important decisions through the whole life cycle of that business.
Alright, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how somebody who figures out that maybe they are in that place where they do need that right hand, that COO, and you do fractional COO stuff as well. What is the process and what do you look for? We talked about the personality traits and things, but do you want to look at somebody who has only been in your industry? Should you open your mind and look somewhere else? What are the things that you need to ask yourself first? What do I need to look for so that they can start with a really good kind of decision making platform for
Yeah.
hiring a COO?
Yeah. I think first is there's actually two types of situations you might be in. One is where you already know what the gaps are in your business. And the second is you don't actually know what the gaps are, but you know that there's some gap somewhere. And these are gaps to get to your vision or to your eventual goal. So in that first case, if you know what those gaps already are, let's say the gaps are in your team or the skill set of your team and you need to upskill them and you're not quite sure how to get there, or maybe you know that the gaps are around the financial aspects of your business, maybe your cash flow, maybe your margins, maybe the type of funding that you have, or you need to seek more funding, or maybe it's on the sales side or marketing side. So if you already understand the gaps, that now helps you come up with what are the type of skill sets that you need to look for when you start hiring. And then secondly, let's say you're not quite sure what the gaps are, but here's what your goal is and you want to get there, but you're not seeing a clear path to get there. That's where now that will also define the type of skill sets you're looking for. In that case, you might be looking for broader skill set versus if you already know what the gaps are, then you might be looking for more focused skill sets. So I think that this is important for you to understand what are the needs of your business. An ideal case is you don't just look at what are the needs today, but can you look out 6 months from now or 1 year from now? What might the needs be at that point? Maybe you still know what those needs are. Maybe you're not sure what those needs are. And so that'll help you define focus skill set or broader general skill set. And then now, once you start looking to hire, there's always a typical skill set of person and then the exceptional skill set, like I was briefly mentioning before. I've always found that if you get somebody who's overqualified, the chances of you making progress faster is higher versus if you get somebody of typical skill set. And especially if you end up going down a path of fractional, where every hour it needs to produce value.
Right.
If somebody is overqualified, the chances that in 1 hour they'll be able to produce you disproportionate results is higher versus somebody who's typical skill set. So uh, with the fractional model, because you're paying for not a full timer, you're paying for a few hours a day. For example, at ScaleUpExec, where my firm, we have a 1 hour a day plan, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day plan, depending on what scope of work is needed. Then even in 1 and 2 hour a day plans, the type of budget you need is way less than if you were to hire a full timer, and the type of impact that you could have could be substantial relative to even having a full timer on your team. And you potentially might even have some budget left over to get like an operations manager that the COO can manage and give them guidance on what to do. So there are, different models that you can work with. Either get a full timer, um, or get fractional folks. And even with fractional folks, let's say you get somebody with focused skill set that's needed to solve your gaps today. But 6 months from now, you have a different set of gaps that need a different skill set person. It's easier to now swap out and get what is relevant at that point. Versus if you hire and commit to a full timer, you're probably not 6 months from now going to be seeking a different full timer to come in with a different set of skills.
Right. Yeah, that's important that again that the role of the COO is when to fill gaps and take this very important role of that 30,000 foot view, particularly in guiding things. So I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure people are going to be thinking about while they're listening in, and that's going to be, well, if I hire someone for an hour a day, I mean, do they get to know my business or am I going to be able to trust them or are they going to end up, like you said, swapping out with someone else? So the idea of bringing in someone that, especially in a small business that maybe doesn't have a huge C-suite available, how do we talk through the value and the benefit, not just in the results, but in having someone who can be in your business for your budgetary constraints and still get you where you want to go? Because I know people are like, well, I hire people based on relationship and I don't want to, my accountant I see once a month. I get that, but not my COO.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a very common question, and what I've found to work, especially in the small medium business space. So, for example, the companies that are maybe 50, 60, 70 people large, or so there or less, in 3 or 4 hours a day, somebody whose exceptional skill set can actually have direct reports into them, just like a full timer, can have one-on-ones with and performance reviews with their team, can guide strategy, can actually roll up their sleeves and execute. So in 3 or 4 hours a day, somebody who's really skilled can accomplish a lot. In 1 and 2 hours a day, it's typically hard to have direct reports into you. And so there, instead, I like to work as a project-focused COO. So in that case, let's say you already know what the gaps are in your business, then you can have that CEO directly dive in that 1 or 2 hours a day, they will be able to actually work on strategy and roll up their sleeves and execute. And between 1 and 2 hours, that just changes the speed of how fast they'll be able to execute. But they'll still be able to bring their vast amount of experience, knowledge, and be able to move quickly. If somebody is of typical skill set, 1 or 2 hours a day is not much. You can't do too much in it. But if somebody is really focused and really skilled, then you can actually do quite a bit. And I myself have had many engagements, and many of my team members have had many 1 hour a day engagements, and we've turned around businesses and brought dramatic results that not even we didn't expect. Like we didn't even expect we'd be able to achieve that in that given time frame. Um, once a business starts getting larger, like over 50, 60, 70 people, then it is quite tough to operate as a full-time COO in 3 hours a day. It
Right.
becomes quite tough. And so there is, that's where somebody like myself, if I was to speak with a business and try and understand what stage they're at, what gaps they're in, I'd be able to understand quite quickly, would we be able to be effective in 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a day or not?
Right. And what about the relationship with the CEO and the company itself? So, can you hire someone who has a good COO background and structure from outside another industry? Maybe because again, you're tech. Maybe you get a restaurant chain. Sorry about that. Maybe you get a restaurant chain who wants to hire you to turn around the chain. Is that something that we would consider, or we want to stay inside our industry?
Uh, I think it depends. Most, like 90% of the time, I find industry to be irrelevant.
Okay.
I find the business problems to be more relevant. So it's actually important to understand what are the issues that this business is facing, and are those businesses that require are those issues that require deep technical skill set in this specific area. 90% of the time, you don't require deep skill set in that technically in that specific area.
Right.
For reference, right now our customers are we've got multi-office psychiatrist practices, but none of my CEOs have been in the medical space before, but we're having dramatic impact there. We've got charter schools. None of my CEOs have been in education field before, like in terms of managing and leadership, but they're having dramatic impact. We've got construction, we've got e-commerce, CPG, and actually, we have less tech companies as our customers. Many of these are more traditional industries. And so for me, it's always important to understand what those issues are. And does the COO that I'm looking to place have a set of have they been through those kind of issues before? Have they solved those kind of issues before? And do they have a cultural fit between how they think through the world versus how the CEO likes to think through the world? Is there a match? And so those are kind of the things that I think through. So for me, industry is not as relevant. It's so far I've not had a very specific need to find somebody who directly matches a specific industry.
Amazing. All right. So we're gonna leave industry as the variable out, and we're gonna be looking at the business problems that need to be solved, how fast or how slow somebody wants to get them solved or accomplished. And then what about on the fractional model? Do people stay with companies for a long time till they change skill set? Or is this something where somebody will come in and maybe work for, 3 to 6 months and then there'll be a gap? Or is this a bridge to actually eventually getting a full-time COO for most of companies you work with?
Yeah. Interestingly, since we've started now a bit over a year ago, we've not lost a single client. So each of our engagements have continued. And I think that's a bit different for different fractional roles. Like a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, or head of sales. In that kind of role, I've found that life cycle is much shorter. In the marketing roles also, life cycle might be a bit shorter because the needs of a business change very quickly, and the type of impact is like very, like I mentioned before, a CFO has or a CMO has to be really skilled in their area, but if there's business issues outside of that area, it might be hard for them to really add value there. But a COO, like most of our engagements today, they might be helping with sales. 3 months from now, they might be helping with culture. 6 months from now, with recruiting processes. 9 months from now, maybe with financial areas or cost reductions. So the CEO role can keep on evolving as the needs come about. And then they will know the business inside out as if they were a full timer. Even if they're working 1 hour a day, they'll know the team inside out. And so, because of their breadth of skills, they're able to fill in a lot of gaps.
Amazing. All right. So where can people learn more about fractional CFO? I'm sorry, COO. See, you gave me too many C-suite things there, CMO too. So where can people learn more about your company and about how you place fractional COOs? And then also where can they just follow you for general, great operational business advice?
Yeah. Firstly, our website, ScaleUpExec.com. On there, you can actually set up time with me directly to speak, even if you're not necessarily looking to hire somebody, but you're just interested in having somebody who's kind of been there, done that, bounce ideas off of them. I feel like it's valuable when you've learned things and been through experiences yourself to share that with others. And I think that's what you're doing even here with this podcast, which is amazing. So I'm happy to even just be a bouncing wall for people to get ideas through. And secondly, on my LinkedIn and through ScaleUpExec.com, there's a pointer to my LinkedIn. I've been posting quite a bit about my thoughts around business and leadership, entrepreneurship, and operations, and in case it could be value to somebody. So that's also a good place to just learn a bit more about how I think through the world.
Yeah, amazing because, again, I think being very honest with ourselves and saying, "I've taken this about as far as I can. I really, want to hit my goals, but I can't do it myself anymore," is a very courageous thing. I think as founders, sometimes we hold back, maybe 6 months longer or a year longer or even, more than that, where we're the kind of the toad in the road, and so this is a very important conversation for people to be honest with themselves and be able to say, "Yeah, I can't see all the gaps anymore," or, "Hey, the last 2 things we did, didn't execute very well. Maybe I need some help." So, this is gonna be very, very valuable, and I appreciate that. We're gonna put the links down inside the description and the show notes and everything, and people will be able to find you the day that this launches or 2 years later. Do you have any other closing thoughts? If somebody is sitting here now going, "Yep, those red flags that he described are popping up all over the place, but I still don't know if this is gonna be the right move because of things like, I don't know, cost or whatever could be holding a CEO back." Um, what is your thoughts on delaying, if you recognize these red flags?
Yeah. Firstly, I think it's important. It's not necessary for you to hire somebody. And it's not always relevant for you to hire somebody. Like you mentioned, financial constraints might be too tough to hire, and that's okay. Don't try and overstretch yourself. I think first it's important to understand what your goals are, because not everybody has a goal of growth
Yeah.
in their business. It might be to have a lifestyle business so having a business that supports their personal life or whatever else it might be, and that's totally fine. So I think it's important to be honest with yourself. Most business owners, feel like they need to grow their business. But once you start diving deeper, you understand actually that's not what they really want. That's just what they've heard that they should want, but they might actually want something else. So I think it's important to understand what is it that you really want out of your business and be okay with that, whatever it is. It might not be growth, and that's fine. So you might already find that based on your goals, the trajectory of your business is just fine. It doesn't need to have to bring in like high power people or deeply experienced people to try and get it to the next level if that's not actually relevant to what your goals are. So I think that's probably one of the most important things. So a lot of maybe several things I mentioned today are really about self introspection and understanding what it is that you want, understanding what your skills are, what the gaps in your skills are, and it's not always relevant to bring in somebody else. It's important to just see how to support your goals best.
Yeah, amazing, and I appreciate that. So, hopefully everybody listening here who've had maybe a bunch of red flags go off, or had some considerations will be a little more introspective. But, please follow, for leadership advice and things on LinkedIn, and we're gonna make sure all those links are there. So, thank you so much for this very important conversation. I think it's very hard sometimes as founders to have to look at yourself as maybe being the toad in the road, but I think these conversations are critical to business mastery.
Yep. Thank you, Don.
All right, we'll talk to y'all next time on the next episode. This is Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.